In the vast expanse of the cosmos, amidst the silent darkness, there emerged a tiny orb that forever changed the course of human history. Its name was Sputnik 1, and its beeping signal echoed across the globe, igniting a space race that would define an era. Join me on an extraordinary voyage as we uncover the awe-inspiring facts surrounding this pioneering satellite, unveiling the remarkable story of Sputnik 1 and its indelible mark on our quest to conquer the final frontier. Brace yourself for a journey that will leave you marveling at the audacity of human ingenuity and the boundless possibilities that lie beyond Earth's atmosphere. Prepare to be captivated by the astonishing tale of Sputnik 1, the humble yet monumental catalyst of our spacefaring dreams. On October 4, 1957, 60 years ago yesterday, the Soviet Union stunned the world with the launch of the first artificial satellite. The small sphere, transmitting a bleep-bleep radio signal, caused near panic in the minds of some Americans as they visualized Russian atom bombs in orbit. It sent the U.S. government and armed forces into a frenzy of activity. If a few different choices had been made by either the Soviet Union or the United States, the history books could have looked very different. Here are 10 fascinating facts about Sputnik. 1. Khrushchev just wanted a missile. When Nikita Khrushchev became the Russian leader in 1953, he had a problem. The Cold War was at its height, and the Soviet Union felt very vulnerable. If real war ever broke out, American aircraft, carrying atomic bombs and flying from bases in Western Europe, could be over Leningrad and Moscow in a few hours. Soviet planes would take far longer to reach the United States. By the time they got there, the cities of the USSR were likely to be charred ruins. Khrushchev needed a new weapon, something that would stop the Americans from thinking they could win a war with a first strike. He needed a missile that could hit the U.S. less than an hour after being launched. 2. Korolev wanted to go into space. Like many men fascinated by rockets, Sergei Korolev dreamed about space exploration, and he realized that the R-7 would be powerful enough to put satellites into orbit. In 1956, designer Mikhail Tikhonravov put forward a proposal for a satellite that could be launched by the R-7, and in September, Korolev got permission to go ahead with the project. The plan was to launch the satellite during the International Geophysical Year, which ran from July 1957 to the end of 1958. For Khrushchev, though, the satellite was a minor distraction. He needed a missile that could hit the U.S. Nothing else really mattered. 3. The heat shield failed. The first launch of the R-7 took place on May 15, 1957. The missile crashed after traveling just 400 kilometers, 250 miles. The next flight, a month later, only lasted 33 seconds. Modifications were made, and on August 21, a successful flight traveled 6,000 kilometers, 3,700 miles, and came down on the target. A few days later, the news agency TASS announced that the Soviet Union had successfully tested a multi-stage intercontinental ballistic missile. A second successful test flight followed on September 7. Nikita Khrushchev was hoping for a big reaction from around the world, but he didn't get it. The missile had flown entirely over Soviet territory, and the tracking systems that today monitor North Korea's launches did not exist. There was no proof, and it seemed the Western world wasn't ready to believe that Russia had a working ICBM. 4. Korolev was a risk-taker. Sergei Korolev didn't want to wait until a new heat shield was ready to test. He knew what he wanted to do with the next rockets to be built. He wanted to launch a satellite. The Soviet military had other ideas, though. For them, getting a fully operational ICBM was the only priority. Launching satellites would just be wasting time on scientific nonsense. That project would have to wait. Korolev then took a huge gamble and went over the heads of the military, who were paying his wages, and appealed directly to Nikita Khrushchev. He emphasized the propaganda value of being the first country to put an object in orbit and convinced the Soviet leader to back the idea of launching a satellite with the next R-7. 5. The simple satellite. Korolev knew that he had to get a satellite into orbit quickly. As soon as the redesigned heat shield was ready, the generals would insist on a return to missile testing. Unfortunately, Tikhonravov's design, which weighed a hefty 1,400 kilograms, 3,100 pounds, and contained an array of different scientific instruments, was a long way from being ready. It did eventually make it into space as Sputnik IV. But in the meantime, an alternative was hurriedly put together. Called PS-1, or the simple satellite, The new design consisted of a metal sphere holding 3 batteries and a radio transmitter, plus 4 antennas. All it did was transmit bleeps at 2 different radio frequencies. It was made so quickly that there were no formal drawings of the design. The technicians building it worked from sketches and verbal instructions, with the engineers more or less making things up as they went along. 6. The telegram that was lost in translation. The launch was scheduled for October 6, 1957, but then Korolev received a telegram that seemed to say the Americans were about to send their probe into space. Determined to be first, he brought the liftoff forward by 2 days. He did not need to panic. The message in the telegram had been somehow lost in translation, and there was no American launch planned, just a presentation at a conference. The mix-up resulted on October 4, 1957, becoming the day that is generally recognized as the start of the space age. 7. The long wait. Today, pretty much everything in orbit around the Earth is tracked and monitored, even down to middling-sized pieces of space junk. In 1957, the Soviet Union's tracking only extended to their eastern border on the shores of the Pacific Ocean. Korolev and his colleagues had an anxious wait of over an hour, with no doubt much pacing up and down and chewing of fingernails, before Sputnik's signal was picked up from the west as it completed its first orbit. Only then did they know that the launch had been successful and passed the news on to the Kremlin. 8. The CIA didn't mind Sputnik flying over the U.S. When Sputnik 1 began regularly passing over North America, many people in the U.S. were horrified. They saw it, quite literally, as an invasion of their space. However, there were a few men in the CIA who were secretly, as is their way, quite pleased. They were the reconnaissance men. The intelligence agency had developed the U-2 spy plane, which made its first flight in 1955. Flying at extremely high altitudes, the cameras on the aircraft could capture a wealth of valuable information. Those running the missions knew, however, that it was only a matter of time before the Russians developed a plane or missile that could reach the U-2. 9. The U.S. could have been first. Wernher von Braun was a man driven by a desire to build rockets, and he wanted to use those rockets to explore outer space. There are some serious question marks over the extent he was willing to ignore the moral dilemmas raised by the planned use of what he designed. But there is no doubt that he was an engineering genius when it came to developing this new technology. Von Braun spent most of World War II developing the V-2 rockets that inflicted some serious damage to London during the war. He then made a conscious decision to lead his team of engineers toward the advancing American forces and to offer their services to the U.S. government. 10. The R-7 was a failure as a missile. Despite its incredible success as a satellite launcher, astronauts visiting the International Space Station today lift off on top of a stretched version of what is basically the same rocket. As an ICBM, the R-7 had numerous flaws. The complex design of a central rocket with strap-on boosters took days to assemble. Then, a minimum of 7 hours were needed to fuel the rocket and get it ready for launch, hardly an instant response to an American attack. The launch pad was also above ground, leaving it extremely vulnerable. Soviet warheads had also gotten smaller and lighter, so the huge R-7 was almost obsolete as soon as it was ready. As we bid farewell to this exhilarating voyage through the captivating history of Sputnik 1, one thing becomes abundantly clear. The tiny beacon that launched into the heavens forever changed the course of human civilization. From its humble beginnings as a simple metal sphere to its transformation into a symbol of scientific triumph, Sputnik 1 captured the world's imagination and ignited a race to the stars. It served as a stark reminder of our innate curiosity and unyielding desire to explore the unknown. So let us remember this pioneering satellite, floating silently above us, as a testament to the indomitable spirit of human ingenuity. If you found out our video informative, kindly subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on our videos.